take it away. Thank you. Well, you know that digital transformation is an unstoppable process and absolutely necessary for all industries, even those where traditionally have been furthest apart from technology. Such is the case of the primary sectors. Today we want to start this panel by introducing some points where technology can solve problems whenever they are necessary as a prior step for digital transformation. We have Juan Manuel Martínez from the Business Foundation for Agropecuario Development at Castilla, León. Juan Manuel, you have the floor. Good morning, thank you. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude and that of my foundation to the organizers of this event and for having invited us to take part at the 16th edition of the ENISE, which is an event which, as you all know, have been going for quite some years now, and it is improving year after year. This has given us the opportunity to put the agricultural sector within this world of new technologies and of cybersecurity. Albeit sometimes it's difficult to establish that link, as I was speaking to my colleagues earlier. We, from the Foundation, are developing certain projects. Some of them have been around for quite some time, and one of these projects is an action on agricultural waste. Some colleagues say that we shouldn't use the term waste, which is rather a byproduct, but really, if we are referring to purines and dung, etc., we are talking about things that we should try to eliminate, and we believe at our foundation that there are several methods available for the processing of these waste, which involve the application of new technologies and also digitalization, but we also assist or require rather the necessary means to provide certain return and to become increasingly sustainable. The processing of waste, we promote the so-called anaerobic fermentation, which is a chemical process which has different stages. We are not going to enter into the details now, but what it does is it produces a kind of gas methane gas, and this can be done in different ways. We can produce either electricity, or we can market it as gas directly, and we can either produce it or transmit it into the grid. This would actually make the wrongly named macro farms make use of this sort of treatment and process, and we can thus reduce pollution, the emissions of gas to the atmosphere, and we could also, of course, produce a kind of gas that's profitable and which has a value. As part of this method, we also produce other byproducts on top of gas, and this is what we call solid waste or digestate. After fermentation takes place, we end up with waste, which is, there is on the one hand liquid waste and another one which is a solid waste. The solid waste can be used as a fertilizer rather successfully, and this is yet again a new source of income, or can be a source of new profit, and we could use it as a non-polluting fertilizer. It doesn't have any kind of odors, it doesn't entail any sort of nuisance for the environment or for the communities, and it can be used at virtually any plot or farm. Given that in certain areas, such as León, there are specific areas where the level of pollution from nitrates and the use of compost and fertilizers, and also the water pollutions in the rivers, etc. This all can be avoided, and we can thus help our planet. There is another aspect that I would like to mention, and that's the farming activities and farming animals. We have been developing a device for the geolocalization of animals, of grazing animals, and technologies and related to this activity, the well-being of these animals, the vaccines, the production of different products. So a whole range of data which can we believe, can have a bright future ahead of it, and where obviously cybersecurity and digitalization services will play a key role. This is, in a nutshell, what we do. To put what we do in the picture, yes, well, it's really interesting, because at the end of the day, everything you mentioned are things that are, on the news every day. Micro farming, waste management, waste reduction, etc., and how technology can help in this regard is also interesting. There are other issues which are also all over the place these days, such as droughts, climate change, and how from the agricultural business, how can we contribute to a more efficient water management system. We are going to hear more about this from Leticia Chico from Agrisan, Sociedad, Cooperativa. She will tell us more about how they worked around water management for watering the farms. Good morning, everyone. Jose Manuel has started with a good introduction to this topic. As we were saying, we are part of a panel where we have the difficult task of dealing with a theme that's really expert. There is a lot of expertise. We are here to talk about the primary sector, and there may be some parts which may be unknown to many of us, as we may not be aware of all sides, of all things involved in cybersecurity. Why am I saying this? Well, I come from a cooperative, a family-based cooperative. It is made up by 4 siblings, and we are at the lower end of the primary sector, if you like. So how have we been influenced by digitalization? And well, I must say that to analyze this, I should give you some background so you can see how we got to where we are now. Water and water-related issues are always difficult, although yesterday we had a very rainy day here in León, but water management is probably one of the hottest topics right now, due to the severe drought that we've been suffering from. How have we effected these changes? Well, from the year 2005, our farming, our exploitation, as many of the exploitations in the region, were dry land farming. I'm referring to maize, wheat, etc. In 2005, we decided to start working with irrigation systems and working with irrigated lands, because we could use different means, such as canals and irrigation canals and dikes, etc. This was a system, a rather rudimentary system, but it couldn't be any other way, because we didn't have any other means to do this back then. Regardless of this, we decided to go for this method. And how did we irrigate? Well, we were lucky because in León we have a very powerful irrigation land, and there are other areas where they cannot irrigate the way we do. We have modernized our exploitations thoroughly, and we are now using aspersion-based systems. These are systems that manage water resources in a very precise and accurate manner. But there are other parts in León and also elsewhere in other regions in Spain and in the world in which farmers are using irrigation by flood irrigation. This is not really that efficient, as you can imagine, and you cannot control irrigation techniques, and there is a lot of water that's wasted and that's not used by the actual plants. So we have been using this other system, which for us, we believe that it is a highly efficient system, this aspersion-based system. We have been changing all the plots. And what did we find there? We were irrigating, but we didn't quite know what we were irrigating because we didn't have a system in place, a digitalization available that would tell us you are irrigating these many liters, you are wasting that much water, or this is the only part that you need to irrigate. So everything was a little bit disorderly, and at the time it couldn't be any other way. That was the only way we had to work. What happened is that in this specific region where we are working in Payuelos, which I think is one of the best modernized irrigation areas in Europe, if not all over the world, and I am saying this because the whole of Payuelos area has a series of canals, and we use irrigation. We are one step before complete modernization, since we get our water through channels and through a piping system, but we don't quite have any kind of pumping systems that are available elsewhere in Payuelos. What does that mean? Well, this has entailed a great improvement, because we now know when and what we should be irrigating, and we have a quota. So we say to the people, to the farmers, you cannot use more than 50 liters of water per week, and they cannot do that because their cultivations, their farms, they don't really need that much water or any more water than the amount that they are allocated. So we do this to avoid water waste. We have digitalized everything we do. Most people say that we are irrigating from home. Well, this is not quite like this. Obviously, you have to watch your farms and your lands, but it is true that from the comfort of your own home, you can start irrigation. You can see whether there are any problems in the irrigation process, and you know that you have your allocation, you have your 50 liters, so you can go on the computer and see, oh, okay, I've reached those 50 liters, I've reached my allocation, and I can cut the irrigation because I don't need any more. This has actually meant a big change, as you can imagine. The rural environment, the rural activities are very complicated. It is not really appealing for the youth or for women. Things are very complicated and very complex, and this has opened up very many new opportunities for young people, for people who want to come and live in our area. And you may be wondering why. Well, because you can make it compatible with other activities. Imagine there are many parts where they are irrigating by flooding, where you have to open the water canals, close them, and you waste so much water. So digitalization for us has been a total change. So this is my contribution, and well, yes, I would like to highlight something. There are data published by different administrations about the profitability of the different exploitations, and how going from a dry land to irrigated land, the profitability and the profits are grow significantly. So this is all about helping an area that has many problems and trying to solve many problems that we can see here in Castilla and León, where the primary sector is very powerful, and we see yet another clear example of how technology is assisting us and improving things. So we are referring to relatively simple kinds of technology, but that doesn't mean that the primary sector does not require to be modernized. The primary sector can apply and is applying advanced technologies that come to complement everything Leticia told us, where you can profit and improve your profitability. Well, it is not just about having a quota of 50 liters, but you need to know where to use them and how. So now we're going to hear from Antonio Sainz. He is the CEO at Qampo with a Q. It is a company providing services to the agricultural sector in general, and he will give us some examples so we can see what type of technologies there are available and what kind of things we can do with them. Antonio. Thank you, Mario. Very interesting, isn't it, when we talk about waste management, resource saving, water saving and energy saving. Obviously, pumping comes at a cost, and this is all very important today. As you said, we provide optimization solutions based on technology to improve the quality and environmental sustainability of productions. What we do is we combine data from different sources, Earth observing satellites, sensors, which are, by the way, made here in Spain, that collect data, combine that data, and generate a series of guidelines so that farmers can optimize their activities and use the right amount of water, etc., not only for the plant to function at the maximum production capacity, but also so that we can actually provide the land with what it needs. This is absolutely fundamental. At the end of the day, we want to be sustainable, and we cannot be sustainable unless we can manage to use resources in a profitable manner for the farmers themselves. So, with this information provided by these technologies, we not only make plants work better, but we also save fertilizers, inputs, etc., and would not pollute, since everything we give to the earth is used by the earth, so we are not polluting our aquifers, etc., or generating all sorts of problems. So one of the biggest challenges we had to face with our technology and the data we use is, well, as we said, we are monitoring cattle positions, sprinkling and watering systems. And one of the largest challenges we find is the systematic and easy to use irrigation techniques, because when the minute you start applying techniques, it is relatively easy to manage the volume of data that you generate. However, the problem is when time goes by and you start collecting more and more data, the exploitations is also growing, we digitalize more and more farms, and we start to monitor more and more processes, so we move on to larger industries involved in several countries sometimes, and very often we implement technology for the fun of it, if I may say. There is a kind of a trend of digitalization or awareness raising, and you start launching your monitoring processes without thinking really about what exactly you want to optimize and how, and this, in my point of view, is absolutely paramount. So the way we structure these data and the way that we use this data is absolutely essential, because otherwise we're going to achieve the opposite effect. Yes, this is something we have said. This problem is not just specific to this sector. No, it's not. It's quite horizontal, and it affects all sectors. So we need to be cautious when it comes to working with the agro industry, because all those data need to be exploited and used so as to provide real optimization and real improvements. We, for instance, had a case a remarkable case in this sense, with an industry where they had been using monitoring systems for years, using satellites, drones, sensors, monitoring stations, fully automated stations. They had been collecting data for 3-4 years with hundreds of monitoring points at different locations in different countries, and really they didn't quite manage to achieve any remarkable improvement, because at the end of the day, when you apply a technology that works, you can see the difference. You can actually sense and feel the difference and the improvement in a matter of months. So that wasn't the case right then, and they were wondering why that was the case if they were applying all the technologies available. And the key for us was, and what we do, was to use everything that was already available and fully deployed, and the only thing we did really was to structure information properly so that it could be used, so that it could be applied to the improvement of those processes that needed to be improved. Only by doing that, only by structuring the information, we have managed to get 20% of increase in these companies' EBITDA. In productivity terms, we're talking about millions of euros of more profitability, only by restructuring their information. So this is absolutely essential. Structuring information properly is essential, and what we do with data also, and this is also a source of concern for many producers and players in the agroforestry sector. They normally use a series of data, they store them on a cloud, which are supposedly secure, and they are secure. There are always going to be attacks and cybersecurity issues, but people do trust that online systems, current online systems, are significantly safe and secure. People do think that shopping on the internet or buying Netflix or buying through Amazon, etc., is secure. But there is certain lack of confidence when it comes to where those data are going, who may be using them. There is certain resistance, not because we think that somebody is going to take our password, for instance, but who is going to spy on me, who is going to know how I am doing my processes. So privacy, which is closely related to cybersecurity, I believe that in the agro-industry is absolutely fundamental to ensure security from the point of view of the privacy of those data. So any industry that aims to optimize a process, an industry or a producer who wants to structure data capture in order to improve those services, need to be absolutely positive that those data are going to be securely managed and that there aren't going to be any security breaches or risks. I think it's important to provide users with that sense of security, and also provide this security to the people in charge of implementing that technology, because otherwise it could actually be a stopper and might actually put them off using this sort of technology, and this is something to be considered. Thank you, Antonio. You have touched upon an issue which is absolutely fundamental. At the end of the day, we are here at the INCIBE, and cybersecurity is increasingly important, even for the primary sector, with the introduction of new technologies, and we cannot look somewhere else, and this is something that must be present in the digital transformation from the early days, from day one. For this, we are lucky enough to have Juanma from Siro. He's the Director of Digital Transformation, and he will tell us a bit about this implementation process for cybersecurity and what it entails for an agro-food industry such as the one he works for. Thank you, Mario. I don't think we can hear you. Thank you, Mario. We've been talking. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the speaker. We are an agro-food industry. We transform products from the primary sector to consumption products, and we have seen digital transformation and cybersecurity as true of our allies. We cannot talk about digitalization, transforming and using technology without knowing that that technology is going to be secure, or that it's going to be stable over time and is not going to give rise to any sort of security issues. That's why we use technology as our ally, and we have three pillars. The people. We are technology users. We need to know how to use it securely. We have the technology. We need cybersecurity tools. These tools, you need to configure them, you need to develop them, configure them, etc. And the processes. Cyber technology, cybersecurity tools, systems and processes need to have a series of documented processes and tested processes so that security loopholes are kept to a minimum. How do we see all this from the primary sector? It is true that we are working mostly with small companies that are a little bit weary of technology, and I think we have to start, as we did in our company, we have to start working with the large blocks or chunks. How am I going to connect to these irrigation systems? How am I going to connect to the GPS systems? Where are those connections, and how secure they are? I can connect, but who else could connect to these? So internet connections, working systems, etc. And then considering other environments. What about my systems, my assets? Do I have an idea how many I have, how they are interconnected and configured? Sometimes we deal with very dispersed devices, measuring stations, for instance, climate measuring stations which are scattered all over the place, and how to manage these, it's absolutely important. And then what happens after we use them, because really we are all exposed to any sorts of attack, and the likelihood of having a security issue is rather high, and we need to think that that will happen. And when it happens, what are we going to do? Do I have a backup? Can I restore my systems quickly? Do I know how to reconfigure my irrigation systems so that they can be up and running again in a short period of time? These are three basic parts or sides to cybersecurity which you have to control and have a clear idea of in a small environment, and always trying to, not to think about cybersecurity as a limitation or a constraint to our activities. Is quite the reverse, actually. It has to be our ally, and doing some small basic things to reduce all risks of suffering any attack. So digitalization companies and the companies acting in this sector must be aware of this. We shouldn't just leave the default configuration and forget about it. There are certain steps that we can take and that reduce risk significantly. Yes, and added to this is the problems. I'm not sure whether this is your case in your particular company, but very often in agroforestry, when we deal with industrial processes, people tend to think about cybersecurity with user positions, servers, etc. But everything that's related to the warehouse and to the factory, is relying on automated systems. They are not patched. You tend to think that these can never be attacked on, and you end up with many devices that can be accessed by virtually anyone on the internet. Yes, I fully agree with that. At the end of the day, the industrial world, the OT world, at the moment, the Industry 4.0 arrived, which require a series of systems to send data to the RP or for any maintenance technician to provide support in the systems, and that robot that you have acquired that's working in your production line, for instance. To do all this, you had to open up the door to any sort of risks, and those risks you need to keep under control. And this is another one of the critical points in the industry. Traditionally, we have been very far away from cybersecurity because that wasn't an issue for them up until recently, and the IT world, the technology areas of large organizations have always been closer to cybersecurity. It is absolutely fundamental for those worlds, for those two worlds to converge, because by using different methodologies, we are going to apply these techniques. You may have had a hacked server, but they may have also changed a process, for instance. You may have losses because somebody has opened up your sprinkling irrigation systems, for instance. Well, thank you.